shall I go ahead, Claire?
Yes, I am all done.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to jump onto the Discover Life guide again because we haven't been there for a while. And Melitta, the genus Melitta, will work on first because it's a tricky one that a lot of people have a hard time identifying the genus even when they come across it because, first of all, it's rare, and second, it looks a lot like Andrina. So we'll run it through the guide, and I'll be curious to see how well the guide does on that myself because it's been a while since I looked too. And now we have shared the screen. I also want to do a quick jump here to, let's see, to the mapping guide. Oh, it should be in the other, oh, here we go. I have two browser windows open. The global mapper here to, again, just to refresh people about global mapper kinds of issues. So Hesperapis is an interesting genus. It's interesting because it's entirely enclosed within North America in terms of its genus doesn't occur elsewhere. It just barely gets into northern Mexico, and it barely gets into the east. So I'm going to click. So first of all, look at what I've done here. I've done Hesperapis with an underscore after it. So the underscore in the global mapper world means that it will show each species within that genus individually. So here, if you scroll down, you can see the color codes for, I don't know, what is that, maybe 25 or so species of Hesperapis. And it's color coded up here too. If I did not have the underscore, it would just show a yellow dot. In this case, that's the default for every location of Hesperapis. And it would show a couple, well, we'll do that. So I'm going to get rid of that, click that, and you'll see that there's some other dots here. So these things are probably almost certainly identified only to the genus. So if we click on that oddball, there it is, Hesperapis. This is from the Illinois Natural History Survey, and it's only ID'd to the genus level, and it's from Framingham, and it's pretty darn unlikely that that is Hesperapis, particularly because Eastern Hesperapis are mostly dune specialists. So we can negate that, but we can also look at a more precise picture here by adding in the underscore. If you have a super species-rich genus, that doesn't work as well because it just overloads the system. But you can still do it and try that out. Okay, so now if we look at the eastern dots here, we have two species. I forget what the name, this is Orisis maybe, and Crenata. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. I don't have them in front of me. But I also want to point out a couple things here. So they're dune specialists. These are actually going to be some kind of actual record. You can see them along the edge of the coast. And here's iNaturalist record. And here is a specimen, it looks like. It's one of the paratypes, so it's from the original series that was used to describe the species from 1996. These are rare bees. They're not on the endangered species list, and they are habitat restricted to dunes and often to the outer sea islands there. But what about these interior ones? If you click on them, and this happens throughout the Discover Life maps, you'll see that it simply says Alabama. And here, the guy who put this up is John Asher. Those are centroids for the state. And what that's recording is that John Asher acknowledges that there's a valid record for, in this case, Hesperapis auraria, which was not what I had pronounced earlier, and maybe it's auraria. Anyway, for Alabama. It's not an actual location. It's just noting they're known from Alabama. And let's go back, hopefully. And we can drop those points. So drop points from county, state, and country, state, and county centroids. We'll do that at the end, but also to point out up here, these are almost certainly centroids for states. Here's Indiana, for example, and these are, that's probably Illinois centroid, yeah. And so sometimes people get confused because these are probably the only real records. Let's see, let's drop the points then from that. We'll go to the left a little bit, and you can see there's one record, which probably is in a sand area, but I don't know what that's about. Let's see, click on it. Illinois Natural History Survey again. Henderson, I don't know anything about that area. I thought they were all along the Great Lakes, but apparently not. These now show up only along the coast. So we'll come back to Hesperapis in a second. I just wanted to give you a refresher on the working with the maps and interpreting the maps. They're extremely useful, but you have to watch out for things like centroids, and keep in mind that it's imperfect and that there is going to be bad data in there sometimes, and you may have to do some checking to double check records that seem interesting or out of range. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they need to be eliminated from that. So at this point, we're going to look at Melitta melittoides, a very cool bee, and we're going to follow it through the guide. And the reason to do this is because Melitta is tricky, and we haven't looked at the guide for a while. And so refreshing answers, in this case, genera on the left, questions on the right. You can choose which questions get answered, of course, at any time. So I have a specimen from Maryland, so I'm going to click Maryland. It says there should be 55 genera scored for that, and indeed 55 kinds match. That gives us some indication. We, at this point, have no knowledge of what family it is. In fact, Melittidae is tricky in terms of its family characteristics. I don't even know what they are. So it's going to be technical. This is why we skip over families when we're working with bees. We go right to the genus. There's information here telling us about how to tell the sexes apart. We do have a female. I'm now going to flip to the microscope so you can take a look at it. This is Melitta melittoides, and if we were looking at the bee genera cheat sheet, we would see that having 3 submarginals is important. Having, you can't see the hind wing, having a greater than a quarter length in ratio of the vernal to jugal lobe is important, and that there are going to be no fovea. There's other things too, but I just want to note them right off the top as we go through the guide. But check, this is such a cool bee. I just need to show you its mandibles. It's a Lyonia specialist, which is an ericaceous shrub. It's not vaccinium. The other 2 Melittas in the east, I think the western one too, is our vaccinium specialists. Melitta americana is cranberry specialist, and there you go for your cranberry work. And Melitta eichhortii is a dewberry specialist. But check out these mandibles, like on this female. Nothing else in North America, as far as I know, although some Megachilidae have awesome mandibles. Reaches like this. I presume it's about ironing open the bell-like Lyonia flowers. I don't really know. It could be something else too, but you know, those are pretty spectacular. So let's get back to ID things. And I just snapped something off that specimen. Oh, a leg. Darn it. That's what happens when you try to move too fast with dried specimens. So we're going to zoom back up here. And we'll go to the guide now. There's our specimen. And if we go to the guide, we saw that it is not either bright blue or a dull metallic blue. That's going to help narrow things down, but not much, because that's the bulk of species are like that. There are no markings of colored markings, whites or reds on the thorax or abdomen. That'll knock out a few. You can see that we're not really running down the numbers of possibilities very quickly. That's why this is a pretty tricky one. There's not one or two salient characters that really get you there. It's the careful process through a guide of some kind that will eventually result in the identification of Melitta. So here, axilla shape, if you recall, where there's a set of bees such as Coelioxys and a couple other species that have the axilla are projecting far out, and others, the axilla are like this. There's a lot of hair here, but the axilla would be around here, and they're not pointing out. They're not making little points. Let me dive in there. We've shown this early on, so I don't really need to repeat it, but the axilla are these segments which are difficult to see because the suture lines are hidden by the overall darkness of the segment, but the axilla would be here. But you can see they don't form points. They are in the same shape as the scutellum. So back here again, we're going to say, okay, not pointy outy. Takes us down to 43, not that useful. Submarginal cells we saw earlier, 3. That takes us down to 28. Wing basal vein, if we look back here, we will see that it is going to be not sharply bent at the end, but rather it's going to be curved slightly throughout. So that means not halictidae. So mostly what we're doing here is saying what it is not. So it is this one. And we're down to 24. Wing jugal to vannel lobe ratio. So we have 3 here, and we're looking at whether it is 3/4 as or more long versus much less or less than 2/3 as long. So if we go back here and we will turn the specimen so that a hind wing is visible right there. So the hind wing in this particular view is, I believe, above the forewing. And we'll go back to looking at ratios and of hind wings to jugal versus vannel lobes. Okay, let me get this so that's more visible and get this magnification. We're seeing parts below. So here below is the forewing. This is the hind wing here. Here there's the base. This is the vannel lobe. This is the jugal lobe here. There's the base of insertion. You can see, if we back out a little bit, that so the question at hand was whether this lobe was 3/4 or more the length of the vannel lobe, and it is not. But it is present and quite substantial, but not at this level, or 2/3 rather. So if we click that, we see that we're down to 24. So it didn't help us again that much. If we look for auroliums, rather than, we've looked at this a bunch over time. So we're going to say, because I'm almost certain it is present, that if we looked, we would find it. And there's Melitta is still in there, so that was the right choice. Knocked out 1 species. If we look at the leg claws shape, I'm not going to bother right now. with looking, but let's just do a little, because that would take a fair amount of time. Let's just, this is the kind of thing you can explore. Well, what happens if I say that the claw shape is a simple one, and you can see that Melitta stays in, but does it disappear? But that still only gets rid of one thing. Let's see if the inner tooth, if there is an inner tooth to it, whether Melitta stays in too, and it stays in also. So it is not really a useful character unless, because at least some Melitta have both characteristics, or we did not know if all the species had one or the other, and it's possible we did not score Melitta for either, in which case, of course, Melitta would continue to stay. So we can come back and eliminate at least one if we were to make sure that it had simple or no teeth, but we're not. In this case, lynx, this is a medium size B, so it's probably also, I have to get my, if you can see here again, I'm getting my ruler that's clear out, and I'm going to measure it. It looks like it's 12 millimeters long. That is probably not going to eliminate that much, but let's see what happens. So it's a female, and it's 12 millimeters. Maybe it'll get rid of perdidas and things. Oh, it did get rid of 2, okay. So we are creeping along the identification. Now I'm pretty much done with the questions on the first guide, which often takes us down close to an answer. So I'm going to have to hit simplify, which is going to bring up a set of questions that help with all of these here. You can see it just takes, this is a species that has no great differentiable characters, and you just have to plow through. Okay, so the guide, after simplifying, often has some little algorithm that presents potentially the most useful characters first. How true that is an opinion of the user. So it's asking here, but let's look at female pollen-carrying hairs, and let's see what we have. If it has no pollen-carrying hairs on the at all, then it's going to be a parasitic species, so that might be helpful. And then we have on the tibia, on the femur, and they could be on both. But let's see, I did snap off one. I'm going to go back and take a look here, and we can see here that we have actually pollen to go by in addition to long hairs. Femur, tibia, basotarsus. So the basotarsus has significant amounts of pollen, and the tibia does, but the femur has none. And in fact, a quick inspection here seems to have relatively short hairs. So we're going to say on tibia and see how that helps us. Well, it brought it down to 15. So we don't have information or know whether it's in a subfamily or not. It's not a male. Skipping that, we don't know these shortcuts either because we don't know the family. And the head labral process. Okay, so we can look at that. We can do that because the next one is a mandible character. And let's take a look at the labral process if we can see it. But the problem often, although this has very long mandibles, is that we can't see that labral process because the mandibles are in the way. They fold it over the labrum, so you can't look at the ratio if it's happened. A lot of people will snap when fresh the mandibles out, but in this case, they can't really see what's going on very clearly because even though the mandibles are long, they still are covering the labrum, which is right there, pretty handily, so not useful. The next one, I believe, is mandible teeth. If we do explore this, yes?
I was wondering at some point while we have the mandibles out, if you would, at the end, zoom out a little bit so I can take a screenshot of, that's great. So I can take a screenshot of those delightful mandibles.
This is only, I should point out, these are awesome mandibles, but only on Melitta melittoides. The other two have pretty much normal looking mandibles.
Great, I will include that in our notes.
Okay, so here this appears to be, to me, confusing. First of all, probably because of this modification. There's a point, so that's one tooth. Now, what's going on here appears to be additional teeth, but I'm going to try and focus it in. It's a little tricky with this view to, like, is that a tooth, 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 or not, or some other bump. So I'm going to say, my opinion right now, I might be able to differentiate that if I were holding the specimen in my fingers, but we're going to skip the label process. Can't see that. Not head, female, number of teeth. We're going to skip that because we can't quite figure out what's going on there. And so male character, no. Female, abdomen pygidial plate. Okay, so the pygidial plate, the good thing here is when working with this group is we get to look through a lot of characters. The raised plate on S6 is just a note. The raised plate on T6 may sometimes be hidden beneath the rim of T5 if T6 is retracted. So in other words, if your abdomen is pulled in and you can't see T6, you may not see the pygidial plate. So we're basically asking the question, is a pygidial plate absent or present? So let's go back to the specimen and ask the specimen about this. See if she does have a pygidial plate there or not. So here is our specimen, T1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have to zoom in and change the position so we can see it better on the T6 and add a bunch of magnification. And see what we can see. So sometimes pygidial plates are really clear and sometimes not so much. And again, we have this notion that they might be hidden. All right, and looking at this dirty specimen, admittedly, back here, you'll see why B identification can be a little maddening, particularly virtually. So here's T6. There's a lot of hairs around here. The pygidial plate, I think of it as basically a tamper. So it's tamping the walls of the nest, or I guess possibly doing things with the pollen nectar ball. So I think that looks, I'm going to say that looks present. So if we have time, we can go to some other specimens. Actually, I'm going to flip to another specimen to see if something is less dirty here. And ask that one. Oh, except that is a, nope, that's female. And see what I can see here. All right, that looks cleaner. Get the crosshairs out of the way. And these pygidial plates are shiny and bright, so I'm going to say that there is a pygidial plate there. So again, we see something similar to the others. That's bare. I'm going to say pygidial plate is present. And so female, pygidial plate present. And it is there. Now we're down to 13. Okay. So we have a mouth parts thing. but only if it's only useful if the mouth parts are out, which in this specimen is not the case, and in most specimens is also not the case. So again, we have to skip that one. So if you're dealing with a regular guide, you would be stuck. So how about the next? Female hind leg basitibial plate, present or absent. Okay, so let's see what we can do on that one. This one's got pollen over it. So I'm going to put it back in the box. And this one seems to have less pollen. So the basitibial plate I think of as a knee pad. So when the female bee is digging around, it's protecting the joint of the leg, hind leg. So there's the hind leg. We're looking at that. We have a basitibial plate right here. They're often this sort of spoon-shaped thing. Femur, no, tibia, no, base of tibia. So femur, tibia, basitibial plate, basitarsus. So present, again, may not do anything for us. Still 13. Okay. Now, wingtip shape. This is that character that a lot of people have some trouble with, but what we're looking for is the marginal cell, whether the point or the apex is on the rim of the wing or bent away, and if bent away, how far it is bent away matters. So let's just first see if we can get a good shot of the marginal cell and take a look at the tip of it and see if it's sitting on the margin or not. Okay.
Sam, can we make a general assumption that our soil nesting species have a basitibial plate, or is that a little too generic to assume?
That's an interesting question, which I do not know the answer to. You would think, but I don't think it's 100% true. So someone can do a study of that. Basitibial plate architecture associated with lifestyle. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know that. Maybe if someone does, then they can add it in. All right, let's look close now. Marginal cell, tip of marginal cell, margin. Is that on the rim? I would say no, but pretty darn close. And if we go back, we see that we have a pointed, two characters are rounded. It's also whether it's pointed or rounded and on the wing or not. So the character, and this is straight from Michener's book, is pointed with point laying right on the margin. It is not, or if bent away from the margin or squared off, then the tip less than 3 vein widths from the margin, which it is. It's basically only 1 vein width away. I hate these two-part characters, but that's sort of what we've been gifted with. And then this one is that the tip is rounded or squared off, which it is not, or that if it isn't and is pointed, that point is 3 or more vein widths away. If we go back, there is the tip. It is that far away. If we look at the width of a vein, that's not that far away. So we, I think, are justified in clicking pointed on the margin. And if we look here, see, this is what you might scan sometimes when doing these guides. Only 4 in the original group after we did the simplify had that character versus 13. So if we're going with the rare one, then we should greatly reduce our number of species. And thank God we have. So now we're down to 3. And next one is facial fovea. And we'll just show the face here really quickly, but there are none, although it can look like it might have it because there's some sort of smooth spots at the tip. So often the presentation of these melittas are of a often more shiny, I would say, although this is not a great character really to take home with, than Andrina. And you can look here, so this is a female, right? So in Andrina, there would be some depressed area filled with shiny, tiny hairs. And there is some architecture here. See, these are shiny areas, but there's no hairs in there. There's no slot like there would be in Hylaeus and other things. So the answer is no, this is a female and does not have that. So we're going to say absent and click it. And now we're down to 2, Dionomia and Melitta. So Dionomia is a halictidae thing, but it didn't drop out originally when we did the often considered to be the character of halictidae in general, which is the bent basal vein, because it really is kind of a stretch to say that it is bent. So it's scored for both. In this case, now this is why these are good guides. We can a species that has both characters or shades, we don't have to make a decision whether it has it or it doesn't. We can score it as both. So now we hit simplify again. I think I did that already. And now we have a set of questions that should just separate those two. A lot of these are not useful because they're like males, the shortcuts that we decided not to do. Here's a male antennae again, male, and then wing, marginal cell, tip shape alone. So in this case, we're asking only about the tip, not whether it's the tip and also how far it is. We will click pointed because it is, and there's Melitta. So that is just a refresher really, and to also point out that Melitta is not easy to identify because you have many opportunities to make the wrong choice when you're confronted by a Melitta and for which you do not quite know that you have a Melitta, if that makes any sense at all. And I need to put the label back on this one. We'll look at a male, but the rest of the time we're now going to go back to our friend, the Genera cheat sheet, which is here. And so Melitta is here. We looked at these characters, 3 submarginal cells, no facial fovea, no scopa present on the femur. We saw all those. Tip of marginal cell laying on the margin of the wing, well, within that fewer than 3 category. Antennal bases at or above the middle of the face. That separates it from Duphoria, so we're not, but that didn't come up in that string of identifications that we did on the guide. We were able to get to it without having to wrestle with that character. And separated from the clypeus by more than the diameter of an antennal socket. Again, we didn't have to do that in the guide. Labrum broader than long. Well, great, except that we couldn't see the labrum. We also were able to identify it without going to that level. Jugal lobe greater than 1/4, which it was, of the ventral lobe, and the tegula oval. So in some ways, we probably could have gotten rid of some of these characters, but we actually chose we chose a separate path through the Discover Life guides to get to this answer versus this path, which is, would also, if we went through the guide, we would also get there. So now, males, what else do we got? We have the 3 submarginal cells, we have the marginal cell, 3 submarginals. The tip of the marginal cell is the same. Antennal bases are the same. We'll probably look at that. Labrum, the same, but again, usually not visible. Jugal lobe, the same. axilla not projecting, tegula oval. Let's take a look so we can have time to get to the others at the face here of this male and look at the presence and location of the doing two things at once of the antenna. So in Duphoria, what's basically going on here is to separate this from Duphoria, this species or this genus. In Duphoria, the antennae are very low on the face, and that's very characteristic for that group. These are not. This is, if we look at the halfway point here, which is roughly like that, it's above halfway. And if we look at what it turns out to be in this particular species, an extremely hairy Clypeus, but we are able to probably define it as, if we had it in hand, we could scrape this off with a head of a pin or angle it to see where the suture line is. But if the Clypeus should be somewhere like around here, the suture line. Here's the antennal base. This is the scape coming out of the antennal base. The distance between the Clypeus, wherever that suture line is under that hair, and here is greater than the diameter of that fossa. You can take a look.
What species are we still at? Melittoides, or what's the species?
This is Melitta melittoides male.
Gotcha.
The males are don't have really special features. When you see that, it's very generic looking bee. You could look at this, I think, and quickly decide that it's an Andrena when it wasn't. So if we wanted to spend more time, we could go through the Discover Life Guide for the males. And I'm trying to think, because of course, Andrena males do not have a facial fovea, which is what dropped out the Andrena from the other. So I don't know exactly what the difference is, whether the jugal lobes, perhaps jugal to vannal lobe ratio is important, but you guys can explore that in the ID guides. All right, Macropis. So Macropis are these very cool Lysomachia specialists. And here's a male. In terms of telling it apart from the other Melittidae, usually you don't, because you're not running through like the sequence where you define that it is Melittidae. You go through the guide, and there's other characters that quickly drop out this species from Melitta, for example. For example, this species, this genus, and Hesperapis both have just 2 submarginal cells there. Put that something underneath there so we can see that a little bit better. So that's going to be characteristic. We also have a lot of yellow on the face of the males. I believe, I want to say the females are always without yellow. I could be wrong there. And if we look at the tip of the wing again, it's basically pointing onto the margin of the cell. We don't have a abrupt turn like in Halictidae. Let's see what, oh, and we have some basotarsus things to look at here. So if we now go to, let's see, where is our, so if we're looking at a male, here is the male Macropis. So 2 submarginal cells, tip laying on the margin of the wing, saw that and that. Antennal bases at or above the middle of the face. We will see that that's clearly the case, and separated from the Clypeus by more the antennal socket. Labral process, again, can't really see that probably. We'll take a look. Jugal lobe, greater than 1/4, very similar to Melitta. Oops, there we go. Hind basotarsus, less than half as long as tibia. That is a real different look than the other species. And usually in the males, there's all kinds of interesting architect. This is not part of the ID thing, but these are short, stubby bees that have a bunch of stuff going on probably for grasping females in the hind legs that apparently are not useful in a guide level. But if we take a look here, and I'm going to see if I can shade down the light a little bit. What you can see is that these are swollen, these are greatly expanded. There's a lot of weird leg things going on. So that should be an indication. These bees, even in flight, you'll see are sort of hump or hunched backed. They're pretty identifiable. They're almost always just going to be around their Lysomachia flowers. The males are chasing the females on the flowers and visiting them too, mostly looking for females. So you can see, like, I think this is even the middle leg, also very much expanded. At the species level, you're looking at a lot of these characters to differentiate them, but it has this overall, this arching kind of look to it. Let's see, if we take a look again at our vannel to jugal lobe things, I don't think I need to show that because we kind of know what that will look like. It will be about a third as the jugal lobe, a third as long as the vannel lobe. The face we saw is greater than halfway above the midline of the face, so it's pretty distinctive that way. And let's look at the hind. If we can find a good shot of it, the hind basotarsus, both of them appear to be pretty curled up. So let's flip it upside down and bring it back. Zoom in a bit here. We have, oh, well, yeah, that's the hind leg there. So I'm going to bend it over a bit and see if we can get a side shot here of this. So a lot of hair going on. It's extremely short. I think the female shows this better. Here's the hind tibia, also quite inflated, and the basotarsus is right here, and the legs are the tarsal segments are running out in front of that. But this first basotarsus is really short, about half as long as the tibia, they say, or less. Let me see if we can maybe rotate this and see something that way without snapping a antenna or something off. I think it's, gosh, there's so much cool things. Here's the tibia, it's sort of planing out of view, and here's the leg. So these are all tarsal segments. The basal tarsus, the basal one, is partially hidden by hairs here, so I'm not quite sure if that's the end there or not, but theoretically it's half or less as long as the tibia. Let's go back and look here, and hind basotarsus less than half as long as the tibia. Let's look in the female, and it's also short and as broad as the tibia in the female. All right, so put this away, pull out the female, and this look of the female is also distinctive. Only thing close to it would be Exomelopsis, in a totally different group and even brushier, but they're small, and they have these big, usually two-tone hairy patches on the tibia and basitarsus, I think. So the white is very bright here. Let's see if I can take that down a notch. Go over here and take it. No, we want to go to the bright white area and take that down. Hopefully, not much. So we'll take this in. So yeah, very. I wish I could decrease this white. Let's see if I run it up so that it's mostly white and see if the white balance or the lightness it'll try and lighten that up. Not really. Okay, if we go back down, there's a lot of hairs on those two segments, and you can see tibia. So these big fluffy hind tibia on a small bee that has a hunched look to it is part of the vibe of these Macropis when you look at them. And the basitarsus is the basitarsus here is theoretically half as long. Again, hard to see where things start and stop with all this hair as the tibia. Versus in Melitta, it's quite long. It's almost as long as the tibia itself. So, and then we don't have any hair on the femur, which is here, which is another general character, at least in terms of going through the guide. So if we take a look there at the face.
10-minute warning, Sam.
Okay.
Unless we want to go a little bit over.
And it's black, not any light colored markings. So if we go now, that was Macropis ciliata, found here at the bee lab, which is almost shocking because they're so rare. I'd only collected one before we found our little patch here at the bee lab. Now I need what did I do with the box of Hesperapis? I put it on, I thought I put it on here. Oh, here it is. A little unit tray. So I've never collected Hesperapis in the east. I've collected but given away Hesperapis out west. You saw from that map that it's really there's only two species in the east, and they're located quite a distance away from Maryland, or from the east. Well, sorry, I'm trying to do two things. So the Hesperapis is in the east is really only located along the coastal areas and in sand spots in the upper Midwest. So it's very uncommon. We saw before I mentioned before, two submarginal cells, and then the tip looks like it is both pointed and on the tip of the wing. Under Hesperapis, we have, I believe it's this one does extremely rare, restricted to dunes. We're looking at a male. Two submarginal cells, tip laying on the margin, antennal bases at or above the face. We saw all those. Labrum, broader than long, not useful most of the time. Jugal lobe, greater than 1/4. Hind basitarsus, thinner than and longer, or nearly as long as hind tibia. So let's look at that here. And when we zoom in on the hind tibia of this male, I think it's pretty much more obvious because there's much less hair involved. So we're looking at the basitarsus there, and the tibia is adjacent to it. So basitarsus, other tarsal segments, the claws at the end, and here's the tibia, and you can see how very much longer and different it is in this species than in Macropis. So, and then if we, then we have these general wing characteristics again. We saw the, I don't know that we really need to go through, I think the vannel lobe here is very obvious on this side. Let's just look at it. But the jugal to vannel lobe thing is one that we've done a number of times. It's
Dan, what species are we on? Hesperapis.
Yeah, I'll have to get that for you because it's a California one that I don't, I got from another collection. So I'll pull it out before we leave this. So there's the jugal, there's the vannel, so about halfway. And those are the primary characters for Hesperapis. Again, not a species that has great individual characters. I'm looking at this one now. I'm trying to get the name off of it. It's right, a lot of tags here. And a lot of these were identified by other people. So yeah, Gary Stage. So Hesperapis arenicola. Okay, so we'll take a look at the female, but it will be extremely similar. And this one I think is also arenicola. So we'll look at the guide here, but it's basically the same idea. In the east, deep sand, 2 submarginals, no facial fovea, scopa on tibia or femur, although it says it's on the femur, so that's interesting. Tip of marginal cell on the wing, antennal base is high, and hind basotarsus thin. And so in addition to not being the same width, it's also longer, or as long as the tibia. In Macropis, even though there was a lot of hair there, the basotarsus apparently, it wasn't able to confirm it, and that is about the same width as the tibia. Okay, so tibia, basotarsal segment, not quite as long as the tibia as was in the male, and this is, width is less than that, the tibial width. And then if we look at the face, we will see that Hesperapis also, while looking very Andrina-y-ish in the female, has no facial fovea, just like Melitta and Macropis also did not have facial fovea, despite the fact that the vibe is pretty similar. So no fovea in either place. So I think that covers things for those groups. Are there any questions about anything we went through?
Just thank you, Jean, for always spell checking me, because it is not my strength.
Gene is an editor, so he's good at it.
And I was wrong. It is in Discover Life. I accidentally clicked the Eastern species.
What's in Discover Life?
This the arenicola.
Oh,
I put in the chat. It wasn't there. I was wrong.
yeah. So I would point out that all the names of these, John Asher has provided a list of Discover Life, should be there as species pages, some with nothing on them, and others we're gradually populating, but they aren't necessarily going to appear in a guide unless we have taken that guide all the way to the west, which we have not done with Hesperapis. It's only the 2 species.
Could the flatness of the abdomen be an important character?
I think it is a vibe. So when you're catching them and pinning them, it's like, well, this really, a very, they're also very soft, squishy, and flat, um, flattened, I guess would be the way thing. So yeah, it could be used, but it's not, it's not something that can be measured. So that is part of the vibe of a recently dead Hesperapis, or alive if you happen to be able to see and find one. They're just really soft too.
Flat abdomen is a family feature of Melittidae, isn't it?
I don't think so, because, for example, I don't think of Macropis or Melitta as having flattened abdomen. I think of Hesperapis though. I don't even know if someone can do a quick lookup in Mitchell or Michener for the characters of Melittidae. I'd be curious. Maybe it's genitalia, maybe it's some other combination, but I'm not sure what makes that what are the family level characters.
This was something going on. Yeah, I was right. You're on this one, I think.
We're also noting that arenicola means of sands in Spanish and Latin.
Yeah, again, I don't know the Western species groups at all, but it may be that they're all sand specialists. But hard to. You have to look through all 25 to see if that's the case.
Last chance for Q&A. Oh, at some point, can you go over the labeling of bees? We might need you to unmute to give us more clarity on your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah, I just sort of wondered how you label them. I mean, what information you need to put on there? Do you put on the flowers? Do you separate the identification label from the location label? Those sort of things, really.
Yeah, I can summarize that briefly. So there are some standard formats, relatively standard formats in North America for label presentation, but nothing is set in stone. And usually you would have locality, collector, date, latitude, and longitude now on the primary label. And then the det label, as we would call it, the determination label, if there was one, would come next in line. So it would be a separate label. And then as people changed names on it, like if a specimen's around for quite a long time, then a lot of time people are adding additional labels, and the bottommost one is always the one that's presumptively the latest ID on that. You just add it to the pin. If you did collect information about floral resources, like it was collected on such and such a plant species, usually that's a separate label. Not always. Some people will add it because you would know that presumably when you're creating the label. And now standard form is to have a number somewhere, a unique number for that specimen. A lot of times with a matrix code or barcode that also embeds that information. Our labels, which we get from Discover Life, and you can create online on their front page, just look up labels. They have a label generator. We'll put both a number, a 6-digit number, I believe now, and a matrix code that can be scanned on the front on your primary label. But again, there's nothing completely standardized. And what I see is when I'm looking at people's specimens, a lot of times they'll just have a number, and that's okay-ish. But the problem is that a lot of times, like, oh, here's a really cool bee. We would need to put this in the national collection, or why don't you gift those specimens somewhere else? And then you either have to send them the number, the interpretation of the number, which they don't like because then they have to make out a label, or the person who is going to be giving away the specimens has to create one. So usually a little front end work to set up your labeling system is the way to go. And the really not way to go is to have everything in a unit tray and say, well, everything in this unit tray was from this collection event, and I'm going to keep it in that. I want to keep it in that tray. When you're doing identifications, really what you want to do is take all your specimens and spread them out over big, let's call them boards or trays, and move them around a lot. And so when you don't have an ID number on there or a way to separate them out, that's very problematic. So when I am doing IDs for people, I usually ask that there's at least minimally a date and a unique number on the label, so I can look at the date and say, oh, that's I get it, because that's a March, so the fall bees are off my mental screen as being possible. And sometimes, it's really useful also to have a locality, if even within an individual study, so you get a little bit additional information. Oh, that one was from that plot, or that one was from across the river. And in the bigger picture, oh, that one was from Maryland, not Texas, or not, India. So that's my download.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Okay, I have a couple things to read from the chat regarding Hesperapis. Not all Western Hesperapis are dune specialists, but I've never seen one nesting anywhere but sand. So that's from Will Peterman. We also have a question. Could you tell us, parenthetical educators, what camera type / brand you have used for this fabulous course? I'm not sure if we can do that without technically being an endorsing situation, Sam.
Well, accidentally, it is if I were to say something, I would say it's a Nikon, and I'm looking on it to say, yeah, we can say that. I mean, that's what we're using. It's we're not saying that's the only one you should use. So it's a Nikon, and we're using, Craig might be able to say more, our loaner of said microscope, and it comes with really detailed software. I think I can flip. Am I still showing my screen? I can flip to the software here. And you can see, just looking at the top, might not be super obvious. There are just lots of things here for collaborations, calibrations rather, what you can do with the image in terms of measuring, and you can take pictures, and it's really handy. I don't know.
Are we mounted on a trinocular?
Yeah. So I can show with the picture now. So if we look at, this is what it looks like there. And it just has a USB plug to my laptop and a electrical cord to the wall, and a sort of a weird proprietary, potentially pain in the butt if you lose it, little hasp, which I can't pull out because it would turn the machine off. It's just like a little, what would you call that, jump drive looking thing that you have to plug in that makes it work. Like if you don't have that plugged in, then the camera doesn't work. And it comes with a person, this that is on retainer. I'll say that Craig could add more perhaps. That is your fixer. Like, how do I do this? And then that person will tell you and help you with the setup and calibration kinds of things. Some of the software is not super intuitive, but you can see what we've been doing, and that's great. But I don't know any of the alternatives.
Fantastic. Craig's not on today, so we can't ask him to unmute, but If you do need more information, email me and we can get you in contact. Our last request is along the lines of if we want to create Discover Life data. You know, me and Cindy have some walkthrough information, but is that something that we would like to do in a class, or should that be a one-on-one chat with each other? I don't think that that's going to be something that everybody needs to do, if we should spend a whole class on that or not.
Yeah, so I'm back on the Genera guide, and I've got this set up to do corrections now. So normally when you hit menu, you don't see all this, but I get a little code, which you can see at the URL at the top, that I add in, which refreshes every, you know, I get one every time I use it. And this allows me to create, change, modify, add species, get rid of species, work on species pages from any computer. So if people are interested in doing their own guide, so I believe.
That's not what we mean. We're talking about labels.
Oh, labels. Oh, sorry. We can just jump there. And so if we go to Discover Life homepage, and you click on labels and scroll down, Dan Carr set this up here. So I believe this link here, it says print labels. And there's instructions too. It takes you to Dan's. Oh, maybe, nope, maybe not. Or maybe we have to go to Dan's website now. Maybe it's not a link here in Discover Life. If you look up Carr and Droege, both bizarre, not great names of the English type.
But we do have this link in your welcome packet.
Okay, and here we go. Insect label making tools, which Dan has created. And so this is like, if I just print that, it lets you do things. I don't know if it'll make a blank or not, but anyway, you can make your own labels there and give them whatever number string you want. And it produces labels similar to the ones that we do at that I use out of Discover Life.
And what if somebody wanted to share their data to Discover Life, or yeah, how?
Yeah, so you can do that. So there's two things here. One, my general suggestion is always to share to GBIF, because that stuff will show up on Discover Life. That may be too onerous. Discover Life, though, will take any data set, and all you have to do is send an Excel spreadsheet, because most people would have something like that. And there has to be a name column. It could be a two-part name column. It could be a genus and species column, or it could be a combined binomial column. And there has to be a latitude and longitude column, and he can take pretty much any type of latitude and longitude. And then everything else, I will say, is up to you. So you can name the columns whatever you want. You can have as many columns as you want. You can get rid of columns that you prefer not to display. Discover Life is only a presentation mapping tool. You can't grab data unless, I guess, you're super clever somehow. You can't go in and download someone's database, for example, but you can look at it. So if you're interested, you can send me a Excel spreadsheet, but better would be to do it to GBIF, then that will show up on multiple platforms.
Follow-up question. So this label maker, which I think refers to what is open on the screen,
yeah,
generates locality labels, but not species labels?
Correct.
Question?
Yeah. So species labels, I can send people, if they're interested, and Claire, I think you use them too, a set of blank determination labels that are in Excel, and then you just cut them out. And then I have one that you can fill in names, and then I use that if we'll do a little screenshot here. I have my common, if I do so much identification, I don't know if you can see that. I've just got a giant foam board of pre-filled out det labels. Otherwise, what people do is they have the same label. You don't want it very big, and you want to use a 0.01 or 0.005 technical pen to write and learn how to write very nicely, which was a struggle for me, and print it neatly. So you're just going to write out your det labels. In museums, often you put a det label on every specimen. In the kinds of collections that a lot of us are involved with, you have unbelievable numbers of some species. So putting a det label on everyone doesn't quite make sense, particularly if you're going to chuck a lot of them and keep just a small number. So usually, and also they're difficult to read, like if you're doing data entry. So we usually fill out a det label, pin it by itself in front of a row of specimens. I'm going to get one right now. So if you can see this box, you'll see specimens with their label that was generated by Discover Life. If the specimen is vertical, that's a female. If it's horizontal, that's a male. And then the det label is in front of a row of specimens. And it's like reading a book. So if you have a lot of the same species, you just continue down until a new det label shows up somewhere else. And then the person entering the data would move to a new species, and then the specimens in the box continue down again, like reading a book, until a new det label shows up, and then you do that. Note how we have the specimens well spaced out. That way the person who is scanning, because we scan in these numbers, scanning these is less likely to accidentally pick up an adjacent specimen number in their scanning, which is problematic and leads, unless you're at the beginning, you're not aware of that, and you can merely be scanning things in, but some will be scanned in twice and some not at all if you're sloppy and you put all your specimens close together. Later, this box is going to get disentangled, and some will get, the pins will be recycled, some will be moved to surplus, and a few will be moved to a collection. And we put things like that large pin or little pins with colors on them to indicate what to do with certain specimens.
Okay, I'm going to read one more comment out loud, and then I'm going to wrap it up because I have a 2:30 that I need to be on, actually about labels. So Nagin says, if anyone wants to comment, I'm at the point where I need to generate labels off an Excel database, and I would welcome anyone's guidance on mail merging where the date actually shows up correctly. Feel free to reach out at Nagin Almasi at cookcouncil.il.gov. Thanks. My det labels are so diverse that I can't pre-generate, as I'm constantly pinning species that are new to our collection. Thanks in advance. And I just want to say, I personally handwrite all the det labels because I'm clearly still learning my spelling. And Sam checks everything I do, so he fixes that as well. Is it okay if I copy and paste that to a follow-up email so that you can get more feedback directly? Question.
Oh, are you talking about the
No, I was asking I'm not sure, sorry, to put it in the comment, which they said, yes, Claire, thank you. Finally, Jean suggests Prismacolor Premier Fine Line Marker, either 1 point or 0.005. or I'm sorry, 0.01 or 0.005. Also, Pigma Micron archival ink pens, same 0.01 or 0.005. I was taught to write the date 20V 2021, where the month is Roman numerals, so there is no mix-up with the UK and US dates. And with all of that label talk,
so that's good, because dates in the UK or Europe as a whole and the US are flipped month day. And I usually, rather than the Roman numerals, because then it's like, let's see, for some reason, it's not automatic, like, oh, I know that's VI is June. I will just print out the first few letters of the month rather than use the VI or whatever. But yes, that's preferable.
Okay. And with that, I'm gonna take that that labeling chat to the email list. So I'm going to copy and paste some of this stuff so that we can continue that conversation. I'm going to stop the recording and wrap us up.
All right. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everyone.